The craziness of last week, which was the worst week of the year, finds its way to spill over into this week. And this week, it all comes down to this with one of the most intense full moons of the year. So if you thought last week was all that was bad, well, we get a little bit of it into this week. However, the good news is this week does end up becoming a little bit better as time goes on. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White, and if you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer. I've been doing this for over 8 years, and I've literally seen thousands of clients. And I just calculated yesterday that I've done over 400 weekly horoscopes, which I find really, really interesting. So anyway, we have quite a bit to talk about this week. However, if I sound weird or low energy, I've been sick for like the past 5 days. I can't shake it off. This past week of the worst week of the year, I mean, my air conditioner is not working. I'm fucking sick. My Wi-Fi is not working. I'm having all types of issues, and I'm doing my best to hold it together. But I'm holding it together for you. If I'm sick, I'm still going to do a video. I'm still going to do consultations. I'm not going to let that stop me. So anyway, let's get started talking about it. So we're talking about August 19th through August 25th of 2024. And we start Monday off with nothing but highlights. Monday is the absolute biggest day of this week. And as we go throughout the week, things get a little bit less and less intense. But on Monday, we start off with the Venus-Saturn opposition as a highlight. We will also have the Sun making a square to Uranus as a highlight. We then have the full moon in Aquarius, also a highlight, and this is also going to be squaring Uranus. And we have the Jupiter-Saturn square. This is a bigger deal for more of a long-term meta, like, 10, 20-year transit. And then after all of this is done, after we get off the full moon in Aquarius, the moon will ingress into Pisces. So let's first talk about this Venus-Saturn opposition on Monday. There's some tension when it comes to fun and discipline, and you're going to be struggling with like pleasure and boundaries. Venus is fallen, right? So there's this idea of like pleasure and fun being a little bit hard to tap into, and it's a little bit critical. I don't know how much fun you guys have been having. It's so funny. I just made a video about this that's going to be coming out, I believe, this week about, why certain astrologers or astrologers might say this time is going to be really, really good. And for a lot of people, it's bad, or astrologers might say this is going to be a really bad time, and people end up having a good time. So I've actually been talking to a lot of people that have been having a pretty good time, and I'm absolutely have no complaints about that. If you're having fun, I'm so happy for you. And I say that with no jealousy or remorse whatsoever. But with Venus opposite Saturn, there's tensions around, again, an opposition is like a face-off. It's these two planets kind of being combative with one another. And if Venus is like fun and pleasure and she's not doing all that well, and Saturn is like, again, boundaries, there's this idea of like, well, I'm not having fun with this, so let me try something that maybe, is maybe a little bit more unorthodox, or maybe I'm even something a little bit more comfortable with. And Saturn is asking you like, hey, is that something that you're going to have fun doing? Like, let's say you don't like drink and party anymore, but you're thinking about going and drinking and partying. This Venus-Saturn opposition is like, that may not be the right thing for fun and pleasure for you right now. And just being able to identify boundaries, and especially like fallen Venus, it's kind of like, well, I don't know what's fun. I don't know what I enjoy, or, I'm afraid of not having fun. So I'm just going to loosen myself up. And so Venus just opposite Saturn is going to be a time of like really testing that. Like, again, if you go outside of your comfort zone in a bad way, I think you will be shown really quickly that you shouldn't have done that. And I think Venus opposite Saturn is just a lot of tension when it comes to like fun and knowing where you need to be more disciplined. So that's going to be a little bit difficult to navigate, especially just because it's so off topic compared to everything else that we have going on this week. And so then we get to the Sun square Uranus, and this is just going to be like an itch to act out. Like the Sun is in Leo, right? We have a lot of pride, we have a lot of ego, and it's squaring Uranus where it's just like sometimes you want to just like show someone who's boss. Sometimes you just want to like, kind of act out. And that itch to do that is really, really strong on Monday. And so there might be an opportunity where you have to do that, where you kind of have to say, you know what, I'm going to let myself roar a little bit. But also don't be surprised if you do kind of act out a little bit, that you, again, get that immediate reaction that, for every action there's an immediate or there's a equal and opposite reaction to. And so you might get a lot more negative feedback. You might get a lot more pushback to that. And so that's something to expect. And so when I look at the Sun square Uranus, it's not like don't act out. You might be in a situation that you absolutely need to be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to do this to maybe prove something to your own self, not necessarily worrying about proving things to other people. But with this Sun square Uranus, we also have the full moon in Aquarius. This is the highlight of the past 2 weeks essentially since the new moon in Leo. We have Mercury, this whole Mercury retrograde, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn square, the Mars-Saturn square. This full moon also squaring Uranus is just lighting up everything that's kind of going outside of your control. Like, I don't know about you guys, but it has just been one thing after another that is not working for me. And it's one of those things where what I hate about astrology is I know that that's going to happen and I understand that's going to happen, but then it still happens and I still get frustrated. And again, I'm just a human being. I'm working through that and like how to surrender, control and not be so angry and not let stress get the best of me. But this full moon is really like, if you thought things were out of control now, wait for this full moon because it's exactly squaring Uranus. There's going to be some major disruptions. And these are all in fixed signs. So the sun's in a fixed sign, the moon's in a fixed sign, Uranus is in a fixed sign. The fixed signs like to have things be stable and be consistent. And when you have this, again, like full moon, usually it's like a realization of that consistency. But with it squaring Uranus, it's like where everything should be consistent and running as, normal, it's not going to. So expect some issues on Monday. Now, when we do talk about the Jupiter-Saturn square, this is something that I can make a whole hour-long video about. But the Jupiter-Saturn square is the quarter point pivot from 2020 when we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. You guys have to understand that we're never going back to normal. What was the life before 2020, we're never getting back to. We just had a triplicity shift into air signs, and we are alive for a time that is having humanity shift into a new chapter. The Earth triplicity that we had over the past 200 years of the Industrial Revolution and all of that jazz, that's over. We're in the air sign now. And when you put that more into perspective of your own personal life, there was quite a dramatic shift at the end of 2020. And this Jupiter-Saturn square is that pivot point. Now, when you look at it as just Jupiter, the planet squaring Saturn, the planet, if Jupiter is about our beliefs and about faith and about hope and it's in detriment, right? We're trying to rationalize everything and Jupiter doesn't work. It's like the more we try to rationalize, the less optimism or hope that we might have. And it's squaring Saturn in Pisces. And Saturn is about reality. And I don't even like to say truth. I just like to say reality. Like what is like, hey, what, without going too deep into it, what is just on the surface? What do things look like? Saturn is about, governments and control and, discipline, maturity, authority figures. And it's also in a Jupiter ruled sign. And so I look at Jupiter squaring Saturn as like Jupiter having this really big, being conflicted a lot of saying like, wow, I'm not actually seeing this bigger picture. Things aren't actually working the way that I anticipated them to. What's wrong with my beliefs? And again, I talked about this on my Jupiter and Gemini video. I talked about this on my 2024 year ahead horoscopes. Like a lot of this time right now is realizing that like, hey, the way that you're thinking about things may not be the way that it should be. Can you open up your mind a little bit? Can you see how you're blocking yourself, if that makes sense? And it's really hard to talk about with just going into a general weekly horoscope because it's not like, I don't really think on Monday you're going to like really just tap into the Jupiter Saturn square. I think as time goes on, you're going to realize that this Monday and this Jupiter Saturn square, I mean, really this past week and this upcoming week is a bigger pivot of saying, how am I getting in my own way? What am I like? When I think of Pisces, it's so much more yin energy and internal, and Saturn is like, there's like a block there, right? It's like, we don't want to trust. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to surrender to a higher power. And that Jupiter square Saturn is like, you might be in a position where you don't have another choice but to like really become vulnerable and surrender to something. I know I've triggered a lot of people talking about how I've gotten a lot more into Christianity. And again, I'm not here to like shove that down your guys' throats. But a reason I've come to that is it's so much easier to surrender to something that is beyond you. And it makes, the things that I think that I have in my control, which I don't, when I just kind of surrender that and I become more at peace, everything becomes so much more at ease. And I really look at this Jupiter square Saturn as kind of like a conflict of your beliefs. And it's like, hey, rather than trying to control and as if you have any control, just surrendering to something, saying, you know what? Maybe I don't know any better. Maybe I don't know what the next step looks like, but I'm just going to trust my path. I'm just going to trust the path that I'm on. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to question about it. And so I look at this as like a really meta like time. Like, again, I don't necessarily know how deep you're going to get into it on Monday because, again, full moon in Aquarius, it's just everything is so in your face that you may not realize that underneath it all, there's a bigger change going on within you. And I think this is just really important. So don't be afraid to tap in a little bit into that. But I would also look at Monday as it's a much bigger deal than I think you think. But then as we go into the later part of Monday, the moon will ingress into Pisces. And the note that I just wrote down here is it's just bath time. It's kind of like you just had a long day. Everything's been super crazy. You just need to unwind, hang out in a bath. I've recently become bath pilled. I've always been a shower person, but I'm starting to really like baths. And I just think that full moon in Aquarius, everything's going crazy. Just the moon goes into Pisces. You have to clock out. You have to leave your work at work, and you need to be able to go home, and you need to be able to rest and relax and be able to unwind a little bit. And that's what I think Monday evening is good for, especially just because there's so much happening on Monday. And so then we get to Tuesday. And as we get to Tuesday, things start to, again, slow down a little bit. Like, again, this Monday and last week are like the craziest times of this year, and things really start to slow down. However, we are still somewhat in the middle of it. The moon is going to be in Pisces, and it's going to make a conjunction to Saturn, and it's going to square Jupiter. And this is bringing up that Jupiter square Saturn stuff. And a lot of this is going to feel like an overwhelming feeling of doom, and you're going to feel confused, and like you're searching for answers, and you're not really sure where to go. Like, it's kind of like when you try to meditate and you have an internal blockage, like you just can't connect. You can't turn that mind off. And it's kind of like, when you feel overwhelmed with information or anxiety, you just kind of shut down. And that's, I think, the vibe on Tuesday. Now, there's a bad part to that, which is pretty much what I said. But I think the good part to that is like, don't be afraid. Like what I've learned in, I'm pretty into the manifestation stuff. And something that one of these manifestation people on Instagram said one time that really just spoke to me was like, if you're in like the super high vibration period where you're just kind of like, manifesting everything, you're feeling super good, like you can't be in that state all the time. You're going to eventually come back down and wind down. But when you wind down, you end up feeling like remorse or guilt or like things aren't going your way. But it's more of a regenerative stage. And so I want you to look at Tuesday as a regenerative stage. Like you don't need to be in the high vibration and everything's feeling good, but you do need to be in that regenerative state, and that could still help you in what they were talking about was like in the goal of manifestation. But I still think the idea of a regenerative state is really good. Like that moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn and squaring Jupiter is like, it's not the time for more information, more answers. The time to just kind of like, hey, let's settle down a little bit. Let's focus on the voices internally to calm them down, making sure you're getting rest, making sure you're getting sleep, making sure you're not staying up all night, scrolling or getting, blue light in your face. Tuesday is, because I think it's just going to be really easy to lean into the feeling of being overwhelmed. The hard part about Tuesday is just being able to have the discipline to know when to stop, like to know when to like, hey, I need to turn off the phone. I need to stop scrolling. I need to, stop being distracted and actually just have some quiet time for myself. I think that's what Tuesday is good for. So Wednesday has quite a bit actually going on because it's a lot of lunar transits. We have the moon while it's in Pisces going opposite Venus, and then it's going to square Mars. Then the moon conjoins Neptune, and then it goes into Aries. So I think Wednesday is the better day to start kind of like getting the ball rolling again. And what's cool about the moon opposite Venus is it's seeing a different point of view. Like, all right, how can I actually change my mind about this a little bit? Now that I've had some silent time on Tuesday, we get into Wednesday, and it's like, all right, how can I see things from a different view? And there's a lot about changing your mind about how to have fun. Like that moon in Pisces opposite Venus and Virgo is being able to at least, again, maybe you got some quiet time, and now for whatever reason, you can have a different perspective on like what is fun or how you can enjoy what you're going through, or at least take the pressure off a little bit. However, what I think is difficult is when the moon makes a square to Mars, there's this frustration in implementing change, right? Like Mars and Gemini is like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm going here, I'm going there. It's conjoining Jupiter. It's just overwhelming. And the moon in Pisces is just, the easiest way to put it is, and I've talked about this before. Everyone says that they have autism nowadays. I don't think a lot of you guys do, but let's just say you do. When you get overstimulated, like I'm totally not autistic, even though I like joking about it. When you're in a crowd or at a party and there's all of this stimulation and you just kind of become deer in the headlights, and you just kind of you're just overwhelmed by everything. That's what I feel like the moon in Pisces squaring Mars and Gemini is. It's just there's a frustration in implementing change, and a lot of that comes from an overstimulation or like just a feeling of overwhelmness, and it becomes confusing on how to navigate. And I think the moon in Pisces squaring Mars and Gemini is kind of like there's so much on your plate, there's so much to do that you just become deer in the headlights and you don't even know where to begin. And so after that, the moon will then make a conjunction to Neptune, and then it's going to ingress into Aries. So I think the moon conjoining Neptune is like you have to kind of like recognize and acknowledge you might feel a little bit overwhelmed, maybe take a breath, go outside. And then once the moon goes into Aries, we're going to have a little bit more of that action. So a lot of Wednesday is like, okay, I think I could see this differently. I think I can make these changes, but as you make those changes, it's just overwhelming still. There's still a lot going on. The moon conjoins Neptune where you still feel a little bit lost. Take that. The moon will only be with Neptune for like an hour or two. take that hour or two to just kind of like, scroll or get distracted or read a book. And then when the moon goes into Aries, it's going to be like, okay, now I know what I can do. I could sit here and focus. Like sometimes you just need to like let yourself space out and let yourself not do anything and like cope with the emotion, work with the emotion of being overwhelmed before you can actually take that action, which is what I think the moon going into Aries is good for. So then we get to Thursday and we're going to be having the sun make an ingress into Virgo as one of the highlights. The moon, while it's in Aries, is going to make a conjunction with the North Node. And then our next highlight that we get is Venus making a square to Mars. So still a lot of weird energy going on. Last week was really frustrating. This week is just somewhat weird. Like things just get weird for a little while. And I don't like how the whole JD Vance thing, like weird is now this word everyone is using. So I don't even like using the word weird. But anyway, the sun ingresses into Virgo. The note I just wrote down is it's nerd time. Like what I like about the sun in Leo is there is a easier time tapping into willpower and confidence. But when the sun's in Virgo, it just becomes easier to just be more calculated and be more, correct and not so like just mustering all this willpower and energy to do everything. The sun in Virgo is just like, yeah, I'm going to clock in, I'm going to do my work, and then I'm going to clock out and everything will get done in a timely manner. The sun in Virgo can get a little bit more anxious and stressed about, again, like meticulous details, especially because Mercury is still retrograde. But I do think the sun going into Virgo is like when you just have like shit everywhere, like right now, shit is everywhere in my apartment. And there's times where you're like, I don't even want to look at it. And there's other times where, you're just like, I want to get my life organized and together. That's the sun in Virgo. So it's a lot less ego and a lot more calculus. And as the moon conjoins the North Node, there's this intense energy spurt. So it's like the sun goes into Virgo, the moon's conjoining the North Node. Just expect to like honestly get a lot of things done on Thursday, both like from a inspired point of view and then also just kind of like a frustrated point of view. Like ever been so frustrated you just get all the shit done you need to get done because you're angry? But we do have Venus squaring Mars, and the difficult part about this is like our desires and our wants and what is fun is not in alignment with like, again, our actions or what we have to do. Like we might have to do things that aren't fun. Like Venus and Virgo is like, well, I'm not having fun anyway. But Mars and Gemini is saying like, well, here's all the things that you have to do that you have to catch up on. And you're just going to have to suck it up. Like we have to do things that we're not going to enjoy. And this is not the time for enjoyment and pleasure. This is the time of like, hey, you pretty much just have to put out a bunch of fires right now. Over on my Patreon, I made a game plan video, which is essentially a monthly horoscope. And I called August crisis management. That's all this month is just crisis management. Now, the other part of Venus and Virgo making a square to Mars is like there's too much information going on. There's like too much talking. There's too much like, again, it's kind of like, ever been in a big group of people, like let's say 8 or 9 people, and there's like 3 people talking to one another and there's 2 people talking across and then these people are talking like this. It's just there's too much and it's overwhelming where again, the easiest way to look at this week is that it's overwhelming. And again, if you're one of those people that this week is great, I'm so happy for you. I'm just looking at the astrology for what it is. And a lot of this just looks like a lot of, loud noises, a lot of not having as much pleasure because of, again, arguments or confrontation, or again, a Mars and Gemini is like debates. So it's like, let's say someone is debating, in this group of people and these other people just want to have fun and they don't want to debate. And so it kind of is killing the vibe. That's another way I'd look at the Venus Mars square. So then we get to Friday and the moon is going to make a sextile to Jupiter and then Mars, and then it's going to make a trine to Mercury. I love that. The moon will then ingress into Taurus, and then our next highlight is Mercury sextiles Mars. So Friday, I really feel like Friday is when things are like, all right, we got some good energy going on Friday. There's this boost in energy from information. The moon, while it's in Aries, is sextiling Mars and Jupiter. So it's like, okay, sweet. This is happening. This is happening. We get the green light. Then the moon just makes a trine to Mercury. So it's like, all right, I can get this done and this done. Anything that the Mercury retrograde is about. So again, whether it's about delays or problems, we get them solved. And then the moon goes into Taurus where it's much more chill. It's much more like, okay, let's hang on to things. Let's just kind of like now that we've had those solutions, we can kind of just chill and ride that out for a little bit. And then when we have Mercury making a sextile to Mars, there's like this quick solutions to problems that are very like duct tape. It's like Mercury retrograde sextiling Mars and Gemini. Hey, you know what? We don't have the exact remedy for this right now, but let's just slap some duct tape on it. Doctors, you're at the doctor's office. They don't know what your issue is. Here's some ibuprofen to hold you over real fast, just so you can just shut up and not be in pain. That's how I look at the Mercury Mars sextile, which again, if you're in pain and you get to the hospital, you probably want to know all the answers, but hey, just put something in you to get the pain to go away. That's how I look at the Mercury sextile Mars situation on Friday. So I feel like Friday is actually like again, it's not nearly as bad as the rest of the week, and there's a lot more like positive momentum happening on Friday. And then we get to Saturday. There's really nothing going on Saturday. It's the moon in Taurus making a sextile to Saturn. It's just slow and steady. We're getting things done. We're not feeling too overwhelmed. It's just a time. It's just a moment in time over this week where we're feeling a little bit more calm and a little bit more grounded, and we can kind of like center ourselves. But then we get to Sunday, and on Sunday is when we have the moon in Taurus making a square to Mercury. It's then going to trine Venus, and then it's going to conjoin Uranus. Then afterwards, the moon goes into Gemini. Sunday's a little bit not nearly as chill. I think the moon in Taurus squaring Mercury and Leo is like an inability to be flexible or change your mind. Like if Mercury retrograde in Leo is like, this is my idea and it's how it has to be. And the moon in Taurus is like, well, I ain't changing my mind. I'm not, I can't even think of the word right now. I hate being sick because I just I'm so much more slower mentally. It's so much harder, especially on video. You have to put twice your usual energy that you talk to people into video. And when you're sick, it's just like, I'm just fucking here at this point, at this point in the weekly. So sorry if I'm not as super intense as I usually am. I'm out of it right now. So I'm just going to fucking straight up read the notes to you. There's an inability to be flexible. An inability to change your mind. And, you're just going to be a little bit stubborn. That will pass. With the moon then making a trine to Venus, there's an idea of just making it work out. It's like, all right, I'm going to be stubborn with this, but let's just tweak this little thing. Like the moon trining Venus is still a good transit. It's still oh, that was fun. Oh, that was nice. It wasn't the best thing ever. It's not like you won $1 million, but you found $10 on the ground. Oh, sweet. That was definitely not a bad thing. How fun and exciting. So there's something that makes it work out, but the problem is then the moon then conjoins Uranus, and there's this sudden shock. Now, the moon conjoining Uranus is either it's not it's just bad or it's just good. It's just kind of well, it depends on where your chart is, but there's a sudden shock that either it could be really good or really bad. Either way, I would look at it as Sunday, there's going to be the stubbornness with a little bit of pleasure, and then all of a sudden it's just a big shakeup again. I would argue that because this is a waning moon and a lot of the major transits have already happened, this won't be nearly as big, but this will just be kind of a day-to-day in the moment, in that hour, being oh my God, what is this? Some sort of disruption. And then the moon goes into Gemini, where a lot of this is about just curiosity, looking for new things. It's once you have that kind of shock, you have a little bit more of an open mind, and we're a little bit more back to the fast-paced energy. Because when the moon goes into Gemini, it will be co-present with Mars and Jupiter. And so there's just a lot more curiosity, a lot more mental stimulation going on. And I think we're a little bit more higher energy versus how this whole week is just kind of up and down is probably the best way to put it. And that's how we go into next week. When we get into next week, we're going to have Venus ingress into Libra. Thank God we got some sort of dignity going on again. Mercury's going to station direct next week. Also, thank God. And we're going to have Venus go opposite Neptune before it enters Libra, which isn't that bad. Venus opposite Neptune is somewhat weird, but then when Venus goes into Libra, it's totally fine. So with that being said, that's what I've got for you guys this week. Comment below. Let me know what last week was like for you guys and what you anticipate with this full moon and how you guys are going to handle it. And like I said before, if you like this stuff, give me a like. It does actually support the channel. And subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all the current transit astrology. And with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. I'll be seeing you next week.